Alright, diamonds in the rough. Last week we did the desk drawing exercise where you had to take a desk and chair, simplify it to boxy forms, and then you can draw the detailed version on top of it. Now this is when we're starting to get into more complicated stuff because you have to worry about two different objects. You have to make sure that the desk is proportioned correctly, and then you have to make sure that the chair is proportioned correctly compared to the desk. And then on top of that, you also have to make sure that everything is in the right spot in relation to everything else. I looked at all of the drawings, and the main issue I can see across all of them is that the desk box is usually proportioned incorrectly. And when the box is wrong, the entire drawing will be wrong, and you can't really fix that during the cleanup phase. It just has to be right from the get-go. So I think proportioning boxes is something we'll have to work on a lot, and I think this week's exercise will help with that. What we're going to do is essentially draw a blueprint. So we have an overall boxy form, and then inside of that form we have a couple other forms, similarly to what you would do if you were to draw a room. And then we make it three-dimensional. So we draw our blueprint shape in perspective first, we give it height, and then we end up with something that looks three-dimensional. Now there are two important skills that are going to come into play during this exercise. The first one would be the thing that we applied during the form manipulation exercise from a couple weeks ago. Basically, if we're going to draw a form, like let's say there has to be a boxy form in the middle of our overall form, we can't just draw this form right here and call it a day. Because the issue is that we don't know where exactly this exists in 3D space. We need to define where it exists, and the way to do that would be to anchor this form back to the outlines. So what we would do is maybe take this edge and extend it back this way. We decide that it intersects here, and now we know that it's on this exact same plane. Because what we could also do is say that this shape is not on the same plane as the overall shape. And basically the way you would define that is by drawing a line down first and then attaching this line to the edges of the box or shape. And then now we know that this thing is kind of floating above. So this is why it's so important to always connect your forms back to the edge. This is going to come into play during the exercise as well, so hopefully you'll start to get a bit more used to it once we're actually working on that. And then the second skill that we need is we need to learn how to proportion shapes in perspective. Let's say we're trying to put this square into perspective. There are ways that let you figure it out mathematically. Like for example, you could draw a circle in perspective, which is an ellipse, and we know that a circle perfectly fits inside of the square. So that means that we can draw our edges of the square around this ellipse, and that would give us the square in perspective. So this is one way that you could draw the shape in perspective, but I kind of don't want you to do this, and instead I want you to train your intuition to draw these shapes in perspective. And the main reason why I want you to use your intuition is because that's what you're going to be doing when you're making actual drawings. And you probably noticed that during this exercise. There's no way to figure out what this desk is supposed to look like in the perspective that you're trying to draw. Or well, I guess technically there is, but it's not really practical. Instead, we just kind of have to intuit what the box should look like proportions-wise, and then we can draw on top of that box to give us the actual form. Okay, let's do the exercise and then we'll see how it goes. So the first thing I need to do is draw my floor plan, and you can just draw it kind of randomly. It doesn't have to be a square, it doesn't have to be a rectangle, you can just do whatever shape you want. But then, of course, the challenge is that you have to put that shape into perspective as well. So let's do something like this, and then I'm going to draw some other random shapes inside of this particular one. And I think for the shapes, technically you could do whatever you want. You don't have to do boxy shapes. You could do circles, you could do triangular shapes. But I think starting off with boxy shapes is probably the easiest way to start out. So let's do something like this. Okay, to put this into perspective, I think I made this edge a little bit longer than this one. It doesn't look like a perfect square, so I need to keep that in mind while I'm drawing this. Let's do this. and then we'll say that. I think that looks about right. Now I need to mark inside of this shape where all of my other shapes are. So we can see in the original floor plan that this goes a little bit further past than the halfway point, which is right around here. So to find that halfway point, we can use the X technique, I guess. Halfway point is over there, so it goes a little bit past it, which would be right there. And then for this edge, it touches right here, and the halfway point would be right around there. So again, we know the halfway point is right over there. So we have one line that's going to go this way, and then the other one would, I think, touch right around here. So we draw it this way. Make sure to connect everything back to the edges because of the thing that I explained previously, because it defines where everything is in space, but it also helps you get the proportions right. Then for this shape, it almost touches this one. There's a little gap between them, so that gap would be right around here, I think. And then the top edge would be here. And then for the last one, its bottom edge basically lines up with this line, and then the other one is a little bit further past this line. So we already have this bottom edge, and then the other one is going to be a little bit over here. This one also does not quite touch the center of that edge, so it should be right around here. We can draw this up, connect it to the edge there. Then for this top edge, touches right around there, which I would estimate to be over here, so we can extend it this way. And then lastly, we need this edge, which touches right around here, I want to say. So we just extend this up, and then we get this shape. So we end up with kind of a super messy thing. By the way, I wouldn't recommend using the kind of brush that I'm using for this, and instead I would recommend using something that has pressure sensitivity, because that way you can actually make the important lines thicker and you can make the guidelines thinner, so it's a lot easier to see what you're doing. But now from here, we're going to make it look three-dimensional. So I want to extend all of these lines upwards. Technically, you could also extend them downwards, but I think it's a bit more effective if we extend it upwards, because then we actually have to draw through our forms and we can't, I guess, kind of cheat. So we extend the overall box up a little bit. Now I can extend this up, see that it touches over there, extend this line up, touches over there. Then we know that one corner is right here. We can extend this up, and to find where it needs to be, we extend this line this way. Do the same thing on this side. And then that should line up with that. Then for the shape that's over here, we would extend this line up this way. This line goes this way. Extend this towards the vanishing point. And then where it intersects is where that corner at the top is going to be. Draw this towards the vanishing point. And then this line should be invisible, but I'm going to draw it anyway. Then lastly, we need to do this middle form. And this one is going to be a bit more difficult because we can't just extend this line up this way and then arbitrarily decide that the upper edge needs to be over here, because that doesn't exactly tell us where things need to exist in space. Instead, we have to anchor these lines back to the edges. So the corner is over here, anchor this back to the edge, touches right there, extend this line up to find where it touches this line, which is right here. Now we can extend this line up, connect these, and then now we know the upper corner is supposed to be over there. Then we extend the line this way. Corner is right here, extend this up. We do the same thing with this line, extend it this way, touches right there, so we know the other corner is meant to be there. We go this way, same thing, extend this up, draw this line towards the vanishing point, and then where they intersect is where we get the corner. Go back this way. Then again, towards the vanishing point, where they intersect is the other corner, and then now we have this form in the middle. And then to make everything easier to see, I just added some color to it, so we end up with something like this. Now for this next one, instead of just using boxes, I'm going to use stuff that's a bit more irregular. So for the overall shape, instead of just drawing a box straight up, I'm going to give it a diagonal edge, like that. And then inside of this, let's do a triangle right here. We can do a circle over here, and then I guess we'll do kind of an angled rectangle right there. Okay, to put the overall form in perspective, I think the first thing I should probably do is just create a section like that and essentially extend it that way. Then I can draw that boxy form in perspective, and I think that would look something like that. Now I need to carve out this triangle. The way to do that would be to first look at where the halfway point is there, and then it looks like the cutoff is about halfway on this edge. So I first need to find the halfway mark, which would be, I think, right over there. And then the other halfway mark would be right here, so that should be where this point needs to be. And then we have another halfway mark here, I want to say, and then slightly below that is where the other cutoff needs to be. So I think right around there. So this is what we end up with. I think the first thing I'll do is draw this triangular form. Again, think about where the halfway point is, right around there, which would be over here. It's a little bit above that, so I think right around there. Then we extend this line up and down and look at where it touches the edge. Seems to be about halfway as well, so we can draw that line like that. Then it looks like this point touches that edge a little bit below the halfway point, so right around there. I can extend that line this way, and then we have one leg of the triangle like that. Then technically to find the other leg, we could do the same thing, but there is another trick that you can use. You can extend a line down the triangle this way, and then take this length and copy that to the other side. In perspective, of course, so the side that's a bit further away is going to be smaller. And then we just draw it like that. Basically, the way that works is if you have a triangle, you can draw a line that divides it like this, and then both of these edges are going to be the exact same size. So you can essentially reverse engineer that. If you know where this point, which is that point, and you know where this point, which is this point, is supposed to be, you can basically draw a line like that, which gives you that middle line, and then you just need to copy this to the other side. Then I'm going to draw the rectangle, and to do that I need this point right here. So to find that, I can extend it up, see where it touches there, and extend it this way and see where it touches there. So if we extend it up, it touches right around there, and then we did the horizontal, which is not quite halfway. So the halfway point of that plane is right there, which means that it's, I guess, right over here. So you would extend this line this way, and then that point needs to be over there. Then from here, you would draw an angled line going towards the same vanishing point as that line, and then we would draw a line going this way. And then lastly, we need to draw the circle. Now, circles in perspective are ellipses, so the circle is going to look somewhat like this, but I need to know where this top edge is first. And again, to find that, I can extend this line this way, see where it touches the edge, looks to be a little bit above halfway. I think the halfway point was like right there, right? So we extend the line this way, and then the bottom edge touches right around there, which is, I think, over here. So again, we extend a line horizontally. By the way, when I say horizontal, I don't mean horizontal like this, I mean horizontal in perspective, because this line is horizontal, and then if you put it in perspective, it will be angled like that. So we have the upper and lower borders, and then we need these two borders as well. So first one will touch right there. We know that the halfway line is supposed to be over there, and that halfway point is over here. So it touches right around there, and I think right around there. So we extend this line up this way, extend this one up this way, and then that gives us the square that we can draw our ellipse inside of. One other useful landmark that you can use is that this point, if we follow it down, it goes this way, and this line extends a little bit past it. So in perspective, we need to make sure that that same thing applies. If we follow this point down, it touches right here, and then the edge of our circle needs to touch it a little bit to the side. Now that we have the floor plan in perspective, I need to extend my overall form up. And I'm actually starting to get kind of confused about what's supposed to be what, so hopefully we can figure this out. And then we have the angled line, which is right around here, and then lastly that line. I'm going to start by making the triangle three-dimensional. So first we extend this corner up and see where it touches right here. Then we need to extend these corners up as well, and we need to know where they exist in 3D space. Now to do that, we need to extend this line this way, touches the edge right there, then extend it back this way, and then we find this line. We can extend that this way, and then extend this line up, and then now we have the triangle. Then the rectangle shouldn't be too difficult, so first we need to extend all of these lines up. We already have the outer plane. Then this line goes towards the same vanishing point as this, and same thing with this one, also needs to go towards the vanishing point. Then this corner gets extended up this way, see where that intersects. Then we do the same thing right here. And then lastly, we have the ellipse, and this is going to be kind of annoying because I essentially need to extend this whole square that we drew the ellipse inside of upwards, so I can draw the ellipse at the top as well. So I'm just going to draw all of these lines up. I know where this touched the edge, it's right here, so we just extend this line this way. Touches right here, touches right here. On this side, we do the same thing, extend this line up this way. Touches here and here, so the square at the top looks like that. And then we just draw the ellipse. Extend this down. Same thing on this side, and then I guess draw the bottom ellipse as well. And here it is with all of the colors filled in. Very mathematical exercise, and I realize that for some of you that might not be ideal, but unfortunately that's just how construction works in drawing. We have to make sure that we know exactly where things exist in space, and really the only way to do that is by drawing all of these lines. And this is going to be the exercise. Like I said, you can draw whatever shapes you want, squares, circles, triangles, rectangles, but make sure that you always connect your lines back to the edges so that you define where things are in space, and really think about how the overall form should be proportioned when we put it into perspective, because this is going to be really important for if we want to draw a room. To do that, we would first draw a floor plan exactly like this, and then we would just extend the forms up. So it's important that you get really comfortable doing this. But if you want to participate in the homework, you can always join our Discord server, which is linked in the description, and there's also a playlist on YouTube that contains all of the previous homework exercises if you missed any, and I guess I will catch you all next time.